prospect video breakdown. This time we're going to go over Andrew Billings, the defensive tackle from Baylor. It is the first half of his game versus Kansas. Billings he's a prospect that's interesting because when you look at his size and you see, 6'1", 6'2", 300 to 310 pounds, a lot of people want to put that size, that height, and that weight combo at three technique. And originally, I did think that he was a three tech, but the more that I watch, the more I think that you just want to leave him at nose and just kind of let him be, a detonator time bomb in the middle of your defensive line that can blow things up from A gap to A gap and just kind of dominate the area uh, that he resides in. And the more I watch, the more I think he's a plug and play nose guard that you draft, mid to late first round, plop in the middle of your defense. If you're running uh, a lot of underfronts like Seattle, Atlanta, Jacksonville do, where you have the two gap on the strong side, one gap on the weak side. He's a great fit there. If you're running a 3-4 like Baltimore does, you can leave him in the middle of your 3-4 right there and just let him wreak havoc. Um, but yeah, he's one of those plug and play guys that you can just drop in the middle of your defense, and that's your guy for the next, 7 to 8 years, for however long he stays healthy enough to play. Um, but the thing with Billings is that he's not even guaranteed to come out to the draft this year. He's only 19 years old, a junior at Baylor, but he's definitely got some NFL ready ability at 19. So if he does come out, that's a guy who's going to have a massive upside for you. So we're just going to run through the first half of his game versus Kansas in half speed. And here we go. So here's Billings, number 75. Looks like he's lined up as a one tech, so he's got this A gap between the center and the guard. And you can see the raw power just right from the jump. His hands and upper body strength is just ridiculous for a guy who's, like I said, only 19 years old. And this is what I mean when I say he's a bomb in the middle of the line of scrimmage. Watch, first of all, the recognition and movement skills are pretty solid here, but you can see some things in his footwork and his hips that show you that he's probably better suited for the nose tackle than a three technique. Because when we're talking about a guy that you'd expect to translate well to be a three technique, you want a guy who's a little bit more athletic and fluid than Billings is. When we think about the great three techniques, we think about not Marcel Darius, and Ndamukong Suh, Gerald McCoy, Aaron Donald, Geno Atkins. All of these guys have great hip and ankle fluidity to make an impact. Rushing these little bit wider angles from the B gap. And I'm not sure that Billings quite has that same athletic ability, same fluidity as those guys that I mentioned do. And watch this on this first play. First of all, the back step. His hips are tight coming out of his stance because you want to make more ground with that back step. So as you see that the guards are moving to your right, so if you put yourself in Billings' shoes, the guards are moving to your right, so you want to make your first step right and gain ground on that guard to keep control of this gap. And see how he's laboring a little bit, and it takes him a little bit of time to explode off that back foot once he gets going a little bit. And also another indicator of tightness in the back and the hips is ability to stay low out of your stance on the move. Anybody can stay low out of the stance just moving forward and just, you know, blowing shit up out of your stance. But the ability to stay low, stay in a position of power on the move is a sign of greater athleticism. And Billings has to come out of his stance when he sees a guard's move. He comes out of his stance, stands straight up because his hips are tight. And if your hips are tight, then it's hard for you to stay low, keep good power level, and move with your gap. But in Billings' case, like I said before, he's got the hand strength and upper body strength where you can mitigate those concerns a little bit at the college level. I mean, look at he gets one push on this center and just shoves him two gaps over, and he played his gap right because he's got to move with that A gap as the guard moves. But you can see the power in his hands, and you can also see the hipness, or not. Excuse me, not the hipness, but the stiffness that would kind of relegate him to a nose tackle role in the NFL. And being relegated to a nose tackle role is not a bad thing at all. It's just kind of identifying guys and saying, okay, he is who he is. Where can we put him in position to maximize his talents? And if you go back and watch that Robert Condici video I made versus Alabama, he's got great hip fluidity, great ankle fluidity. He can stay low on the move. Billings doesn't quite have that, but that's not bad. Just put Billings in a position where he's going to win the most, and you've got your anchor of your defensive line. Here he is again, and that's just good gap discipline to stay on the move. I do like that he's making a conscious effort to strike with his hands first. Does a better job staying low out of his stance. But one issue that I do have with this is bringing your feet with you out of your stance. You know, he's kind of leaning right here, and he's not, you know, it's weird because when you're a defensive tackle, there's a lot going on at the snap of the ball. So you want to have good awareness of where the offensive lineman in front of you is going. So let's do that first step. He sees the guard moving left. He moves left, but he doesn't take a big enough step out of his stance. And it really doesn't, I mean, it doesn't have an effect on the result of the play because it was a bootleg to the opposite direction, but you can see that the feet are just a little bit slow, and he ends up in the B gap. Recognition is there, but the feet aren't quite quick enough to get him where he needs to go as fast as his brain is diagnosing it. And it's kind of something I talked about with Kenny Clark when I watched his game for Stanford. But Kenny Clark had tremendous foot speed and tremendous athletic ability for, you know, a 310-pound athlete. Billings isn't quite there. Here he is lined up in the A gap again, rushing the passer. And right here, so when you have these interior twists, you're pretty much delegating two responsibilities. You have a smasher and a scraper. And in the NFL, Billings, he's almost always going to be this smasher just because of his strength. But here they're doing when I played, we would call this a 30-1 stunt. So the 3 technique is the smasher, and the 1 technique is the scraper. So you've got Billings selling upfield a little bit, You've got the smasher uh, playing from the B gap over to the A gap to try to occupy this guard and then get into the center's way. But it takes Billings a little bit to get going. And then would you if you were talking about him as a first round kind of elite three technique, you would want him to be able to bend his hips, uh, stay balanced as he bends, and explode through this gap, through this blocker, through this gap, and take down the quarterback. But look right about here. You know, he's almost standing straight up, coming right into this gap. And while he wasn't going to get there regardless because the quarterback's already throwing the ball, look how stiff his ankle is right here. You know, this isn't a position of fluidity or balance, or this isn't a position to explode out of into this blocker. This is a position of I'm not comfortable in space. So I've really just got to make the best of it what I can and hit something. And you can even see, this is nitpicking a little bit, but you can even see this hitch step that he's working with right here. And uh, if you're not going to have the best explosion or fluidity coming out of your stance, then you need to stay right tight on this scraper and really almost be ass to ass with him as you come around. But he gives up too much ground, gives the guard time to come back. You see the stiffness in the ankles and the hips. You don't see the open field explosion that you would want out of a typical, first round three technique prospect, and he doesn't get there. I don't think that's Billings. I think Billings is here again at the one technique. And here they are on a stunt. And you see him try to fight off the double team a little bit as he comes through. And you can see how strong he is. He just throws his guard to the side and then tries to make his way through the tackle. He's in the one technique again, so he's got the A gap. They're playing him on a line shift, so he's moving to the opposite side A gap, and then just try to take on that double team with the you know 3-step drops out of shotgun going into the double team. You're not getting there 95 out of 100 times unless you're like a superhuman athlete. One technique again. And even from these one technique spots, you'll see Cincinnati and Miami play Atkins and Sue respectively at one technique spots because their initial get off is so good that you know you can blow up the center and make a play. If you could blow up the center before the guard has time to help you, you're a generational player. If you can blow up the man in front of you before he gets his second foot in the ground, you're a generational player. And again, these aren't knocks on Billings because it's almost unfair to ask that of him. Or when we even talk about a Marcel Darius, which is a comparison I've seen to him on Twitter. And when you go back and watch Marcel Darius' Alabama film, this is a guy who can beat a college offensive line before he gets his second foot in the ground. And Billings, he's just not that guy. But you do see the strength, the upper body strength to 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 move guys on initial contact. And you don't really see that that same, hip drive and explosion, because it does take him a little bit to get going here. So you get the first step, which is a nice get off, but look, 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 look at look at the initial leg drive versus where his leg ends up in correlation to his body. So you see the get off. I mean, the get off is fine. I mean, in relation to his teammates in the offensive line, and you see the leg. It, you know where is the drive? That screams, I have tight hips. Look at Sean Oakman. Sean Oakman isn't a he's not a guy that I would take in the first round, but just for comparison's sake, watch Sean Oakman's inside leg in comparison to Billings' left inside leg. Sean Oakman's knee is at a 45-degree angle. He's in a position to explode and strike. Billings can't even get his to, like a 60-degree angle, which screams hip tightness, lack of fluidity. And it hinders him on his second step because he's not able to use his legs to explode into the center and drive him back into the lap of the quarterback. But his upper body strength is so good that sometimes it almost mitigates that issue. And in college, you'll get away with that. He gives chase, but most defensive tackles aren't going to catch a quarterback flusher from the pocket. But again, it's these things like where where is the second step coming down in relation to the first step? How far can you drive off that first step to make an impact on the quarterback? Where is this right leg coming up so you can see hip explosion and hip fluidity? He just doesn't have it. It's not there for him. And these are things that's going to limit the positions that he can play in the NFL. But he does do things well if you confine him in a box and say, all right, we're gonna put you on the center, or we're gonna put you in this A gap right above the ball, and we're gonna tell you to go forward and just blow this up. And he does have the upper body strength where he can make some guys miss with that. But if you're gonna ask him to be a three technique and play in space, that's just not where he is. That's not where he's comfortable. And even here, when he's chasing the quarterback, where's the explosion, man? The explosion out of your redirect. That's another thing that top tier three techniques have. Now that now that I'm seeing this, now that I saw it and talk my way through it, kind of, it's actually bothering me how little ground he's gaining on the second step. You know, he's coming out of his stance high. I don't know the heights of the guys next to him, but he's coming out of his stance high. His first step is barely getting any ground. The second step doesn't show any explosiveness. He's not a flexible player. He's a tight player, but he's a powerful player, and that does come to his aid. And look at the upper body strength here to try to create that one arm post move to try to, if you create if you create space with one arm, or if you can create space with one arm, that's a great signifier of upper body strength. But I do have issue with this move too because when you're talking about executing moves as a defensive lineman, especially as an interior player, you want to think about your hands and feet as being attached with a string. And what I mean is when you're committing to a move, you're especially if you're trying to cross face like he is here, you want your left arm to move with your left leg and your right arm to move with your right leg. And you can see that he's pushing with his left arm, but he's not really making a great effort with his left leg when he strikes with his left arm to clear that gap, to clear that guard. And he does make the effort. He does make the effort after the punch, but if you bring it with the punch, it'll help you get that drive going, so you can cross face and try to get to the quarterback. And again, this is also speaks to a lack of hip explosion, hip fluidity, to not really be able to drive through that. His upper body is, I won't say it's much more powerful than his lower body, because it's I mean scientifically it's not, but the hip fluidity is restricting, you know, some of the potential that he has, or his lack of hip fluidity is restricting some of the potential that his upper body produces. Yeah, I'm not even sure if he was in on this play. Yeah, that I don't think that was him. Here he is again, and they're running a slant. You can, I mean, he's a bowling ball in the middle of the line of scrimmage. If he can get his hands inside of the offensive guard's hands, it's over, and you can just see him driving the guy back, even though I mean, it's an outside zone, and he got called in the slant, so that's not really a gap discipline issue on him. On those plays, you're just looking for traits. And here he gets a great get off from the line of scrimmage. He's in a position to dominate this A gap. He sees the offensive linemen are moving to his left. And look, he's got good pad level. He's got his hands inside the offensive inside the center's chest, and he just drives him back. But the opposite side B gap just gets completely washed and allows the running back to get upfield. But you can just see the brute strength that he has. Here he's in a stunt, and when he gets, on the occasions where he gets, some solid stride length to build up power and speed. Gets his hands inside. You see the upper body strength, the hip drive here. He'll put you on skates, and he puts them right back into the quarterback's lap. If you can get that on a little twist, or not a little twist, on a little slant where he's going the from a from a shade to head up through the slant movement and dominate that center. That's again flashes NFL strength, NFL potential to be, you know, a bomb in the middle of the line of scrimmage. And this was just messy play on both sides. This three technique gets washed, kind of just muddies up the whole line of scrimmage. Kansas fumbles the ball. That's just a play that you throw out. Here he is again at his usual one tech spot. They got a little slant going. He takes on the guard, and you can see the extension. Look at his hand. He has his arms in the guard's chest, and the guard isn't even touching him. He's in a position of power, a position to explode with his hips. He's got the upper body and hand strength, so once he gets his hands inside of you, it's a wrap. Drives him right back into the quarterback. I wish he would be a little bit more creative and disengaged, but Kansas, their O line isn't the greatest in the country, so they're trying to get this ball out quick and trying not to get their quarterback demolished. And then they're just dropped him in coverage a little bit. This is a play that you have to make. I get that. Well, I mean, not even. I was going to say that he's coming from the opposite A gap, but look at all this space that you have. And he does a good job by creating some of his own space by getting rid of this guard and push him into his teammate. That's good spatial awareness of what's going on right here. But if you have this alley and this running back within a 1, 2, 3, 4 yard distance of you, and you've created this open space, you have to close this space and make that tackle. And you can see his hips are laboring a little bit as he comes out of here. He's left himself in a position where he's not a fluid enough athlete, so he's not on the ground right here, and he's not a fluid enough athlete to recover from that and make this play in the open field. If we're talking about a guy who is going to be considered a first round 3 technique, these are the plays that you have to make. Can't get it done. He's not great in space, and he's not great. He's just not going to be a great player who you're going to ask to chase down running back from the backside like you can with Kim Dichie or Kenny Clark. It's just not his forte. And you can see the grip strength. This is grip. This is why you power clean. Push, pull on the ground, but it's a 3-step drop, so you're just realistically not going to make a huge impact on that play. And once these are the situations where it's really clear to, it's really easy to kind of figure out and scout what defensive linemen are going to do. Look at, situationally, 3rd and 8, you're up 24-7. They're throwing the ball. You can even see he's got his butt a little bit higher in the air. He knows that they're passing the ball. Get in a little sprinter stance and be ready to explode out. And once he gets his hands on the center, it's over. He's just too strong, too powerful, too big in the upper body. But you can see the little hitch once he throws the center aside. Right there, he's got to take 2 steps with his right foot to make 1 step with his right. Excuse me. He's got to take 2 steps with his right foot to get 1 step with his left foot, and that's another indication of a struggle and a lack of fluidity. And I just don't like seeing, if you're going to be asked to move, you have to be able to stay low. And look, he's standing up higher than every other interior player, and just leaves him in a position where he's going to get walloped by this guard. But again, he's got rare upper body strength that he can eat that and not get washed to the sideline. But this is a lack of fluidity type of deal where you're coming out of your stance and you have to take two steps to the right and you're standing up. That's not good. That's just not good football. And it's not really even something you can work on because you don't just become more flexible over time. It's just kind of he is who he is, and this is where he's going to thrive. Playing head up, playing nose guard, clog up that A gap, leave room for your linebacker to come fill. This is where he's going to thrive. You eat that backside block on the zone, hold your ground, let your linebackers read, fill, react. That's just beautiful team football, and it's caused by him being the anchor in the middle. Again, head up on the nose, and he's just walking the center back. And it's funny because you can even see like he's not exploding out of his stance. His upper body's just so strong like he's just gonna walk these dudes back. And that's what he does time after time again. Because there's no real explosive step. His first step doesn't even make it a full yard. From the dash to not even the other dash. That's just pure upper body strength. But he does do a nice job of getting his hands in a position to exploit the lack of strength by the Kansas offensive lineman. And hand position is a huge portion of the battle. If you can get your hands inside the offensive lineman, or if the offensive lineman gets your hands inside of you, that's 90%. That's not 90%, but that's like 70% of the rep right there. Hand position and leverage, and he has it here, and just walks him right back. And again, just too strong. He's the other day I described him on Twitter to my friend Derek Klassen of Optimum Scouting. He's he's a bowler that needs the guardrails up. Don't ask him to make these plays in the B gaps or move all across the line of scrimmage. Set up his guardrails in the A gap and just let him run straight forward. Because he doesn't really have that great first step or the hip explosion to make up for a lack of timing with the first step. But his upper body strength is so strong that he's just going to walk dudes back and be a boulder in the line of scrimmage against the run. Here he dominates the gap, keeps his good leverage, keeps his head in the gap, and just swallows the dude up. And if you pair him with a five technique that has block shedding ability, and you leave running backs in these 2-on-1 situations, and you leave Billings in a situation where he's not gonna have to chase down the line of scrimmage, and he can just kind of sit back and fight off an offensive lineman with one hand, and then keep his gap side hand open. He's gonna make a lot of plays in between, that double A gap period. But when you ask him to expand past that, that's where he struggles. And again, really just a lack of explosiveness out of his stance. He's not gaining any ground with his first one, two, three, 4 steps. He's in a bad position. And then he has to take another step backwards. So he's in this position, which isn't a position of power, and then he has to take another step back to get in position to make the tackle. And it just speaks to lack of flexibility, lack of fluidity. I I do think he can be a really good NFL player. You're just gonna have to limit what you ask him to do, and that's just due to athleticism. And this play right here is when the this is where the Sue McCoy, Darius Donald, that that caliber of player. This is where that that died for me. You're gonna come around on the scrape, and he does do a better job of staying tight to his buddy and making it a little bit hard for the offensive line to come and get him. But once you get here, if we're talking about a guy that's gonna go, you know, top 5 or top 10, you got to be able to kill this inside hip, lean, get around here, and make that tackle. And it's tough because he has a center coming back, but it shouldn't take you. You shouldn't have to completely stop your feet once you get to the apex of your stem. Like once you get to the top of your stem as a scraper, you should be able to kill the inside hip and make a threat. And the weight or the this is a linebacker right here, but if you go back and watch Marcel Darius, yeah, I want you guys to do some homework. If you go look up um, Marcel Darius highlight tape on YouTube, it should be the first option. It's like 3 minutes. I'm gonna leave in the comment section here, or not the comment section, the info section. Look at the first play versus Arkansas. I want to say he makes a play where he comes off the edge, kills his inside hip, dips around, and makes a sack off the edge on the quarterback. And he's 6'4", 300 pounds. Billings is not that athlete. And you can see the linebacker, sink and kill his hips. And, it's not fair to compare 220-pound linebacker to Billings, but the lack of the stiffness and the lack of flexibility, you can see it once he gets to the top of his stem as a scraper. He's got to stop completely and put himself on he puts himself on skates just naturally by trying to run the hoop. Here he is the one, and they're running a slant the other way. Yeah, and this is just tough because it got muddy really quickly. When if you slant the opposite way that the ball is running, you're gonna get you're gonna have a tough time. And this is where you do see this is better because he does gain a lot more ground with his second step, but he gets stuck here, and his you look at his elbow. His elbow's way out here. He's leaning forward. He doesn't have stable feet on the ground. He's not in a position to fight through this double team, so he just gets kind of stuck. But if you get stuck, and don't move off the line of scrimmage like he does here, he even does make a little bit of ground, maybe like a quarter of a yard. But if you can at least not get blown back into the linebacker's laps, that alone is an accomplishment with yourself. And again, that speaks to his strength, and I think that speaks to his future as a nose tackle in the NFL. And, he does a good job by gaining ground with his second step here. First step, left, right step upfield. I wish he could gain more ground though, because again, situational football. You're up 52-7 in the second quarter, third and four. They're throwing the ball. You don't need to be uh, you don't need to be hesitant and play the run first. When you make this left step, when you make your movement step, gain ground with that step, gain ground upfield. But he goes backwards, which again speaks to tightness in the hips, but he gains more ground with the second leg. But again, most of his reps are just won with upper body strength and just being able to outmaul the man in front of him. Upper body strength, body the man in front of you. One thing I do like about this game though is he's a bully. He's he's here to hurt you, and you love to see that out of defensive line prospects, really out of any prospect on the football field, besides a guy you want to be the face of your franchise as a quarterback. Just be a bully on the football field. It's not a nice game. Be willing to hurt people. Get upfield. Be mean. And even though he's not great moving laterally, he's a guy that's he's a guy that's going to explode upfield, and just look at this. He's a guy that's going to be able to explode upfield and just hurt the man in front of him. He gets his head into his chest. He just walks him back and makes things extremely difficult for the running back in the line of scrimmage. When you have a nose tackle that can do things like this, dominate two guys, and just blow this play up so bad that the running back is getting hit 1, 2, 3 yards in the line of scrimmage as he gets a handoff, that's a special trait in itself. Actually, wait, was that Billings? Oh, he's right here. Okay, excuse me. But still, he's here, takes him at center, blocking back, pushes him to his teammate, and just blows that play up. Yeah, so that was Billings. Excuse me. But like I was saying, if you can find a player who you can plug in and be the anchor of a 3-4 defense, even if you have to take him on the field at passing downs, that's a guy that's extremely valuable. And right now, even as a 19-year-old, he's strong enough to dominate those. He's strong enough to dominate dual A gaps and be a two gap plugger in the middle of your defensive line. I'm just worried about how much athletic potential he has. I'm worried about his hip tightness, his ankle fluidity, just general flexibility. I'm worried about his side to side speed. But if you can if you can get a guy who's gonna just sit there, move the line of scrimmage back 1 yard on a consistent basis and eat up double teams and let your linebackers run free, that's an extremely valuable player to have for your defense. And it's hard because a guy that my ideal comparison for him would be Brandon Williams, the nose tackle in Baltimore. And Brandon Williams is extremely explosive. He's or not extremely explosive, extremely disruptive in the middle of the line of scrimmage. He's eating up double teams. Dominating the he's dominating the A gaps, and he's helped lead Baltimore to one of the top run defenses this year. It's just hard to justify spending a high pick a high pick in the first round on that type of player because he's not offering the same pass rushing upside that you would want out of an impact interior defensive lineman. Um, so I still have questions about Billings that I'm gonna figure out for myself throughout the draft process. But this is another prospect breakdown with your host Charles McDonald. Shout out to Draft Breakdown for having these videos ready to go. Shout out to Rob Donaldson. You can follow him at Rob Donaldson on the clock OTC. His username is right down here in the bottom left. Um, thank you for thank you for watching this tape with me and